Nice.
That's your theme. There you go.
I like it.
It's my wife doing all the vocals, but yeah, that was our tribute to you. Not meant to sound like you at all, so no insult to you intended.
No, it's great.
But there you
Yeah,
go.
really cool.
Cool. Well, listen, thanks for talking to me. I've really been looking forward to this. If there's anybody out there who doesn't know who Andrew is, he's one of those rare creatures, somebody who can genuinely call themselves a session player. But way beyond that, he's one of those guys who's doing it all the time at the highest possible level and is a great soloist. Uh, and he makes his own albums, and they're great with great players on them, fantastic tunes. So I'd rather talk about that to start with, if you don't mind. I've seen a couple of
Sure.
reviews really where people have quizzed you on your early days. You studied at the University of Miami, is that right?
Yes.
So that's a place that has quite a heritage with jazz players as well as sort of studio kind of guys, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I was drawn there because it, at least at the time, it seemed like there was a balance between this super heavy jazz thing, but also kind of real world and like rock players and
Yeah,
people that I had seen. Like I knew, I think that Will Lee had gone there, and just seemed like a place for people that were actually out there in the world doing stuff.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
all these players that had been connected by that place, so I thought there must be something to it.
Well, there obviously is. I mean, I'm really interested in the jazz side of your playing. I wish I'd had a bit more time to do it, but as soon as I started listening to your stuff, the language is really interesting because there's a lot of obviously blues rock and that sort of stuff in there. But the actual meat and potatoes of the jazz side of it is really a very defined style. I know, any really serious players have got a defined style, but I was really struck by the way you use sort of modern, sort of pattern type playing. I thought that was really interesting, almost like a Michael Breckery sort of way of combining descending patterns. I was really struck by that. Is that what are your influences in that area?
Definitely Brecker. I mean, I've transcribed his playing, and I still have a CD player in my car, and I still have CDs, and I do listen to a lot of his like '90s era stuff. I love that kind of saxophone playing.
Yeah,
So either by osmosis or by actual transcription, and let's see what I can do with this. He's definitely an influence for sure.
yeah. I mean, I'm glad to hear that I was sort of on the right track with that. But I'm looking at my other screen like a lunatic. Well, I've transcribed a little bit of a solo from. It's the first tune on your record with your trio with John Robinson, and I don't really want to expose myself, but anyway, there's a line. Uh, I love that. Really snaky.
Yeah.
Whatever. I love that. That's so here. It's that sort of.
Oh, cool.
I, I mean, I always think when I hear similar things in Brecker's playing, it feels like that comes from like that late Coltrane thing, like a Love Supreme. You're just superimposing other tonalities for tension.
For sure.
Is that how you feel about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And A Love Supreme was, I mean, like so many other people, it was such a huge record for me because, look, I'm still a garage band guitar guy at heart. So like when you hear that record and this energy that's just so visceral, and like, I mean, any layperson on the street, you hear that, and it's just, it's the universal language thing. It comes through whether you're into jazz or not. So like so many other players, that record was a huge influence.
Yeah. So, I mean, what was your early training with jazz then? What did you go through, like the studying bebop when you were at college? Were you going through the science
Yeah,
stuff?
kind of the typical route I think that a lot of, especially guitar players, take, where you learn rock music or whatever it is that you're into, and then something catches your ear, and you go a little farther, and then a little farther still. I think in a way, like kind of fusion, and there's a band called the Dixie Dregs, or the Dregs. Steve Morse is their guitarist and primary composer, and he was a big influence. And that was kind of maybe like the gateway drug for me, like because it was like here's all these different things coming together in a place that was still accessible. And that was sort of a launch pad. And at one point, I found when I was a teacher, sorry, when I was a teenager, I found a teacher who was a working jazz guitarist, and he really steered me down the kind of not just bebop, but sort of, I mean, I use the word modern, but at this point, it's 30 years old, that kind of like Pat Metheny, John Scofield type of playing. So all that kind of stuff, he really hammered into be more that language. And then of course at college, they even drill down further on the sort of Charlie Parker, um, kind of bebop playing.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting. I wondered if there was a real Steve Morse influence in there. I heard a bit of that.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, it's funny. I was telling somebody else. It's also, I think he was an influence because it was like here, like I mean, Slash is great, but as a kid, like I mean, I didn't grow up like that, and it was like, wow, that's kind of scary in a way too. Whereas like Steve Morse is just kind of like this dude that was like you can picture him like on a tractor when he's not playing guitar, and he's just kind of like a more of a normal guy that is also like this incredible musician. So I think that was also maybe something that drew me to his playing and concepts and stuff.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. So when you first came to LA, I know we got a mutual friend in Chris Standring who's been there a long
Yes.
time. When you first went to LA, were you seriously targeting the session scene, or were you just trying to make a living as a pro?
Well, both. I was seriously targeting the session scene. I mean, that's really what I moved here to do, sort of with blinders on. Like I had done I'd done the original band thing. I had done some touring. I had sort of kind of was in one of those bands that, like they call them club dates or casuals or whatever. And I sort of knew like that stuff is okay, but maybe it's not for me. And then I did a little bit of session playing and I really felt at home there. So I moved to LA like with blinders on, like I want to be a session player. Having said that, I had to eat. And so I did everything else. I sort of just said yes when the phone rang. But if I ever came to like a fork in the road where I couldn't be in two places at once, even if it meant like turning down like at one point I turned down a tour of South America with a pretty big artist, and I not because I was working so much, it was just like, man, if I'm gone for 6 weeks, I'm gonna lose all these kind of things that I have going now. So even though that was a difficult, you know, decision to make, ultimately I was always trying to look 5, 10, 20 years down the road, kind of what's going to help me in the future.
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting to see your own stuff at the same. You're doing that stuff at the same time as doing all these amazing sessions. As I say, if there's anybody watching who hasn't checked out Andrew's stuff, this is some serious music and some serious guitar playing. There's first
Thank
two
you.
solos on Fun. There's some bits where you let rip. Some lovely sort of tearing it up sort of playing. Killer solos. If anybody's in need of persuading, just put that album on. Buy it, in fact. That's the way to go. Go old school and buy it. But
Yeah.
it's really interesting to see that you've got so deep into the creative side as well as finding the time to do your day job as well.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, but I definitely got to a point where I was like, okay, hold on. You know, the reason I picked up guitar in the first place was like to be creative and be out there in the world. I don't know, again, just creating stuff with other humans. And so much of, my quote unquote day job is sitting here by myself going, I don't know, I think that was good. So it's definitely it's cool because like the one sort of helps the other, and they both um propel the other one and keep everything fresh.
So, what sort of proportion of the sessions do you do where we can record at home? How often do you get to do it? Because I know you've got a great studio there. How much? What sort of proportion would you say is at home?
Um Probably about, I would say about half is at home, and then another half is, or another half, about maybe the other half would be then split evenly between um like the quote unquote like old school way of playing in a room with other people in real time, and then maybe let's say the final 25% is just going to a composer's house where it's, I'm still the only person um recording, but there is some face-to-face interaction. And a lot of times people come here too. That's nice.
Yeah, sure, yeah, yeah. I mean, I've got to drop some credits now for again for people who might not be aware of your background. I'm just looking at a few things I dropped from your website: the Mule, Clint Eastwood movie, The Greatest Showman, Kick-Ass 2, The Walking Dead, Frozen, Logan, The Simpsons, Cobra Kai. You've played with Buble, The Who. I mean, what a career! That's really amazing. Here's a question then: when you do a session, generally, when you leave the house to go to a studio, do you normally expect to have a full spec for what's required, or just take the kitchen sink, take everything with you?
It depends. A lot of times that's dictated by the budget. So if it's a big movie and there's a full orchestra and it's on a big scoring stage where you're probably going to have to park far away and walk anyway, usually it's just kind of expected you're going to send kind of everything. And that way, you'll be covered.
Yeah,
Sometimes that'd be on the high end, and then on the medium or lower end, they might say, "Hey, all you need is an acoustic guitar. Is it all right? Can you just bring that yourself?" Um, and that'll be fine too. So um, I try and get as much information ahead of time as I can. Although, like Monday, actually, I left the house to go to a studio and play with other musicians, and they sent the music. Like literally, I was almost in the car, and they sent an email. Oh, here's a Dropbox link, so you know what to bring. It's like, oh, nice.
oh
Thanks for
dear,
all that
oh
notice.
dear, yeah. Have you ever been caught out with not having the right gear?
That's a good question. I don't think so. Usually, if it's something off the wall, they will tell you in advance. So certainly, there's been times where, I mean, sort of what happened is I moved here with like two guitars, and then little by little, people say, "Do you play ukulele?" And I'll go, "Yeah, of course," and then run to the store and get one and figure it out and practice like, "Oh, wow, I got to transpose now. That's weird. Okay, so I got to pretend that there's a capo on the fifth fret, even though it's an open string, and quick and try and get that together. And then, you go, okay, that worked. And then sort of keep that going. And then happens enough times where, wow, I have a uke and a mando and a banjo and all kinds of crazy other stuff. Um, so now I'm sort of covered for the most part. And if it is something that people would think, I bet he doesn't always bring that, they'll ask. Um, and a lot of times too, it's even just an email where it's almost more of a discussion of like the tone of the film or the tone of the record and what they're going for. So like sometimes producers are, usually it's more a case of like, we're going for something old sounding, so bring whatever you have that's old, and they'll sort of put that out there in advance.
Right, right. So Chris Stanley was saying that you're friendly with George. How do you pronounce that guy's name?
Hearing,
Earring, yeah.
yeah,
Obviously, he's well known for playing all the sort of crazy instruments. So you've been dragged down that route, I assume.
yes, very much.
Foods and
Yeah,
all
he's
that.
incredible. George, man, I wish he would do more of these kind of interview things because, like, he's just he's amazing. He's like an incredible person, an incredible musician, and he's really not well known outside of the LA like film music community, and he's just really a treasure.
Yeah.
So I wish more people knew about him.
Oh, he's amazing. I mean, he's played on some of the greatest film scores of all time. I mean, all
Yeah.
Thomas Newman things. I mean, it's not just playing the guitar on it; it's a real contribution. So, I mean, amazing. Yeah, really amazing. So, I mean, that's Do you have to make a special effort to keep your hand in with all those crazy instruments like ouds and saz and all that sort of stuff? Or
Yeah, I mean, for a while I did for sure, and now I wish I had more time to kind of do that. So it's this constant state of like, I mean, luckily I sort of, it's weird. There's almost like a skill set where the the mental gymnastics of going, okay, how's this tuned? Oh, right, this is in fifths, except it's like a lower than a mandolin. Like doing that calculation, that is a skill set in and of itself that kind of almost gets easier. So the
right,
more you do it, the more, I mean, half the time you're at somebody's studio and they have more stuff than I do, and they're handing you like, and you're going, what is this? How do you have this tuned? Oh, okay. And they're like, ready? And you're like, no, but you just kind of make it work. So doing that enough times, um, certainly I wish I had more time to keep up all those other crazy instruments. But there is a thing where if you do it a lot, that it sort of sticks with you, that kind of, how's this tuned? Okay, hit record
yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. I guess my own experience of that is playing kind of sort of open tuned guitars for solo
Right.
and a bit of mandolin. But yeah, I kind of get it, but I'm nowhere near where you're at with that. I tell you one thing I wanted to talk about is your trio with John Robinson. I mean, oh man, I love that record. I mean, that guy. It's not just reputation. Just the way that guy plays the drums is just the tone of it, the placement of everything. But the bass drum. I was just listening to that album
Yeah.
again for the gazillionth time today.
Oh,
The
thanks.
way
Cool.
you guys play together, the three of you. I mean, this is an organ trio for anybody who hasn't checked this out. It's a fantastic project. John J.R. Robinson on drums, Andrew on guitar, and what's your guy who plays keyboard?
Mitch Towne.
He's fantastic. That guy.
Yeah, he's
Again,
great on
like you, he's got
B3.
that sort of hip modern sense of things, but he's got this bebop in there. Just great. But the way the three of you play together, it's like the hippest organ trio ever. The sort of groove
Oh, thanks.
is
Yeah.
killing, absolutely killing. So, is it the bass line? Is that played on pedals on the organ, or is it left?
I think it's mostly left hand,
Right,
and
because
then
it's
the
very
pedals
ornate.
are used for emphasis in
Right,
certain places.
right, okay, okay. How did
Yeah.
that come to pass? I love it, but how did you hook up with? How did you come up with that for?
Well, I had played with John for many years just on various sessions and things, and we are always kind of talked about doing something, and then but it never really materialized. And then literally one day he sent me an email, and it was very brief. It was like, "Hey, July 11th and 12th, you in town? Let's make a record." Like literally that. And I was like, yeah, okay, let's do it. What did you have in mind? And he then says, so there's this organ player, and we have this idea to do this trio, and we'll all just contribute tunes. And um, I think they even had some studios kind of in mind where we could do it. And it was, yeah, it just kind of happened. It's crazy, actually. It really fell out of the sky from that email to like less than a year later, this record label in Japan picked up the record, and we did this tour of Japan as a trio.
Yeah,
It was crazy. And then following that, actually, we did an East Coast tour with Tom Scott. So it was a quartet,
right.
and we played 5 nights at Birdland in New York City. So, and really, now we need to go in and record again because we played so much together.
Oh yeah,
We actually have an EP that's kind of, we just need to get in gear here a little bit and get it out there. So
yeah.
that'll be coming later this year, I hope.
Oh, amazing! That's a great record. Everybody's watching this. You all need to own it. Every single one of you. Buy it. Don't just stream it. Just killing. So, how long did it take? So, this was a rush, kind of, to get everything together. I imagine in the studio. How much getting together was involved before actually doing it? Did you try to put
We did quite a few like Zoom meetings and emailing back and forth, like just kind of ideas, so that we made sure it would sort of all fit together sonically and musically. And literally, we did a day of just kind of set up and making sure the sounds were cool, and then 2 days of recording, and that was it.
amazing, amazing? Just great. The three of you is killing. Just killing.
Thanks.
What
Yeah.
instruments did you use on that then? What guitars did you use?
That would have been I have like a Les Paul style guitar that I use for a lot of things. Um and then I have a guitar made by B.A. Ferguson Guitars, and it's also like a two pickup thing. It kind of looks like here I have it right here. I'll show you.
Right.
So it's
Bit like a Dan Electro looking
a
kind of.
little bit, yeah. It's really, and it's a little bit small. You can see it's really fun to play. I mean, it in the best way, it feels like a toy guitar. You pick it up and you're like, oh, this is fun.
Yeah.
So I mean, like right out of the gate, that's like a good feeling to have about an instrument,
Yeah.
especially when a lot of the music tends to be under the umbrella of like, okay, this is like serious music here. It's kind of like I'm sort of like that almost contrarian approach of like, yeah, but I'm going to use this like pawn shop kind of guitar, but it's actually great and I can get a lot of sounds out of it. And then I don't have it here, but I have an old Yamaha from the 70s, I think, that's kind of like, so I guess it would be like an L5 if it weren't, I think it's like 2.5 inches thick instead of 3.5 or something like that.
Right. Oh, they can be great.
So that's a like, and it's a great, I mean, you plug it in and you go, oh, that's an arch top. You can really, it just really comes through on recordings.
Yeah.
I use that on some of the more like slightly straight ahead stuff.
Yeah. I saw a thing you were doing a demo, or certainly using a Heritage,
Yeah.
or H150, I guess. Have
Yeah,
you?
that and they have a 530 that I did a demo of.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that was a really cool thing actually. A buddy of mine just kind of connected me, and of course I was familiar, with the company, and just kind of off the cuff did some videos for them, and they're really great
Oh
guitars.
yeah. I
I've
got
been playing them a lot live now too. It's like a 330, so it's if you took a 335, but it's completely hollow. There's no center block, and it has P90s rather than humbuckers.
So that's a 530, not a 535.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. 530. Yeah.
I've got a Heritage jazz box called an American Eagle. If you ever get the chance to get your hands on one, you should try one. It's like
Yeah.
an L5. It's just amazing. Really killing jazz
They
box.
make awesome guitars. Yeah. It's really
Absolutely.
great.
Yeah. Here's a question then for you. What's the furthest you've ever had to go on a session from your sort of natural wheelhouse? What's the time when you've been
Hmm.
most stretched stylistically in a hurry kind of thing?
That's a good question. Man, nothing comes to mind.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I mean, wow. Yeah.
I maybe because I feel like I'm kind of faking it all the time
No, but yeah, I
in a
mean,
way,
you really talk about being in practice at getting stuff together. You know, who's doing more of that than you?
Actually, I'll tell you, just yesterday I had to do a thing where it was kind of, and actually George was playing as well. It was sort of like a Django-y thing. I mean, not like it didn't have to like we have to make believe it's Django, but in that wheelhouse.
Yeah.
And there was some improvising. And that is actually difficult as someone who's, I mean, I'm sort of a little bit every day, I'm still practicing improvising and what is my thing and how am I moving this thing forward and trying to play modern and still make the changes and incorporate all these influences and sound like me somehow, to have to then improvise and there's swing, it's a swing feel and there's chord changes. It's hard to not have all this other stuff, Michael Brecker, Coltrane, whatever the stuff we've been talking about. It's hard to not have that creep in when you're supposed to be sounding like Django.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because especially when you're improvising, it's one thing if you're reading a melody and playing it with those kind of inflections and things, but when somebody goes, okay, here's some changes now play, you know, the instinct is like, all right, yeah, let's play all my hippest stuff. but you can't do that necessarily. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's actually some of the more difficult kind of, assignments that you get, at least for me.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very particular language of playing, isn't it? It's not any
Right.
bebop. It's yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, it's interesting. Interesting. Yeah. Uh, Here's a question. I don't know if I should talk about brands, but when you're recording, do you do you tend to use a lot of modeling gear, or do you just avoid that?
Um, I maybe it might just be because I'm old now, but I tend to use only really kind of the old like tube amps and outboard gear.
Good. Great.
Um, yeah, and I have an Axe Effects. I got the Ultra, the very first when it came out, and I was way into it, meaning I really, really wanted to make it work. And I had, here's 10 clean sounds, and then, from 1 to 10 is my clean, and then 11 to 20 is my just breaking up. And, I made all these sounds and I would use it. And I know the stuff gets better every day, but the thing I found with that was I would get stuff dialed in here going, okay, this is going to sound great. And then I would go anywhere else and it would sound totally different, which you think, well, no, it should be more consistent than using an amp and knowing the amp and knowing where the SM57 goes on that cabinet to get the best sound. But actually, that approach I just described, where you've got one amp really well and a good speaker cabinet, and if I put an SM57 here, it sounds pretty much like I want it to sound. After all the years of doing that versus all my months and years trying to make the Axe Effects work, it for whatever reason, for me, I found it to be actually less reliable in terms of this is going to sound good
Yeah.
when I hear it mixed 6 months from now.
Yeah. I mean, at the level you're working at, the scrutiny is very close, I imagine. So I'm thrilled to hear that. I think you're fighting the good fight. I'm really glad to hear it. That's
I'm
great.
yeah, I mean, I'm trying, and but I do. I mean, look, I live in the real world too, so a lot of times people say, "Hey, can you just bring one guitar and go direct?" And I'm able to make that work. It's fine, but it's not my preference.
Yeah. Sure. Sure. So here's another question then. In the studios you're working, I know you work in all sorts of different kinds of studio. Is there not a problem with isolation, or do you generally expect there'll be like an isolation booth you can put your cab or your amp in?
Totally depends. I mean, anything from um, I just did a movie for Michael Giacchino, and he really likes to do everything live. So it's you know 30 violin and all these woodwind and brass, and then there's percussion in the back, and then we're kind of next to the percussion. There's two guitars and electric bass, and then there's drums in a booth. But all that other stuff is bleeding into everything, like you know two guitars both in stereo, so two cabs blowing air
Brilliant.
like right into the percussion mics, and yeah, they make it work. I
Great.
mean, all the stuff that we grew up listening to has bleed on it, and it's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and it's that funny thing where people go, and when people do things differently. Gosh, by the way, get off my lawn. I'm starting to sound like one of those. But there is that thing where you go, huh, why isn't it sounding like the good old days? It's like, well, you're not, the process is not the way that all that stuff that
Yeah.
you
Right.
wish your stuff sounded like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So it's everything from live amp bleeding into everything else to ISO, put the speaker cabinets in an ISO box, uh, to going direct.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. Well, that's thrilling. That's great. No wonder it sounds so good. Yeah. Cool.
And I mean, I totally understand that sometimes, a lot of this stuff is made, it's like decision by committee where, um, weeks or months down the line, the director could go, what is that guitar part? I don't like it. Take it out. And they need to be able to take it out or change the sound or whatever. And when I record here, especially if it's like a newer project or something where we're trying to find the sound, I always record a DI, a clean DI as well.
Right.
And I have a splitting thing where you're able to split it and it doesn't change the tone of just the good amp sound that you want.
Yeah.
Um, so because I do live in the real world and I understand that somebody, a lot of this stuff that I do, unfortunately, it's serving the picture. It's sort of subservient to something else. So there, that happens. People do want to change the sound. So that's sort of a thing where like a lot of times it's like, should we do it this way or that way? And sometimes the best choice is can you do it both? Can you like again record the DI, and by doing that I have the freedom to go like okay, that's super vanilla basic, um and then let's just throw tons of paint on the amp sound or whatever.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
yeah, it sort of gives you freedom to be more creative.
Oh, that's amazing. Listen, man, I don't want to take more of your time. That's very kind of you to take the time. It's really, really interesting to hear you speak. Again, I've got
Oh,
to
my
say,
pleasure.
anybody who's watching, please check out Andrew's music. Please buy it. It's so good. If you're a guitar head, you're going to love it. If you just love great music, you're going to love it. It's really considered music, great harmony. If you want to hear somebody playing with loads of chops, yep, that's in there too. It's just great music. So please go for it. Andrew, thanks for taking the time to do this, and I'll see you down the road. In fact, I might see you in a few weeks.
I hope so. Yeah, thanks so much.